Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I'm Bart, and I am talking to you the day after the U.S. men's national team crashed out of the Copa America tournament they hosted. A Copa America tournament that should have been not just a test, but a real ability for this team to come together and grow together in an adverse environment. And instead, they wilted, they stumbled, and ultimately failed to get out of the group. To talk about this with me is someone who feels like he's being punished for having to just be here right now. It's your friend of mine, Thomas, aka US Keeper Thomas. This is not a Kuva moment, but I'm struggling to figure out another time where the team has let us down so badly.
Yeah, it's a tough one because you really look at the impacts of what this is. It's just an opportunity, right? That's what it is. And so, and in the structure of how the game works now, they get fewer and fewer of those because there's just not a lot of opportunities to play quality teams, just because of the structure of the different confederation tournaments they have with each other.
Yeah.
So you lose that, right? You lose that now because now you don't get to kind of play at the next elevated level in a knockout stage of a tournament, right? Because that's really, the next level, right? And that's what they struggled with, 2 years ago, right? Is getting through a knockout stage match, right? Because this group is all kind of together, right? Majority of these people were at the World Cup together, so that opportunity it doesn't exist now, and you can't get it back.
Yeah, this absolutely was a missed opportunity. Yes, it was a test for the team. I feel like the problem is that the team, because this is how the coach freaking approached it, felt like, oh, well, this is just all a test. This is just all of a training exercise, and we're going to go through the motions and figure out how to do a tournament like this at home, and it'll be fine. This should have been a momentum building moment for soccer in this country. And I think lots of folks failed to capitalize on that, but specifically for the men's national team, they not only failed the on-field test that they supposedly set up for themselves, they failed off the field to capitalize on the moment. A moment that they could have convinced fans that they were worthy of the support that they had in the stands this tournament, and that they could have had for the next 2 years, and that they could have had 2 years from now in the 2026 World Cup. And now they're going to spend the next 2 years trying to find ways to convince us again that they're a team that can make not just a run in a tournament, but the knockouts. And that's quite frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, I don't. It's funny because I don't get this. I mean, mind you, I think the way they communicate with the media, with the fans, you don't really see like this, this big outward like concern from them. They were never ever concerned with it until then it happens,
No,
right? You know what I mean? So, and I don't need to be worried about it.
a lack of urgency.
Yeah, and there was never any of that, right? There was like, oh, we're fine, it's like it's a big match. Like I don't care if you had the 6 points heading into the Uruguay match. It's still a big match and an opportunity to play a clearly very physical team and a team that, in that environment you just don't see very much. And so they just didn't have that urgency. They didn't have the, I don't know, the drive. They try to turn it on and off. They're not good to turn it on and off. They're not that good to do that. It always has to be on. You've got to have your, foot on the gas pedal, full bore from start to finish. And I'm trying to think the last time I saw a full 90 from this group, right? In a match that mattered, right? A full 90 quality match. You'd have to go back a little bit, probably. It's certainly not been since Greg Berhalter's been here in his second stint, because the numbers are ugly. And they can say whatever they want about that. Oh, we're playing better teams. It doesn't matter. Like, you have a losing record in your 14 matches back. That's not acceptable in
Yeah.
and of itself.
I want you to put a pin in that point because I want to get back to it. But before we go farther, I do want to take a moment to set the scene a little bit better. If you are just falling from the sky or whatever, the U.S. men's national team failed to advance from Group C in the 2024 Copa America, the tournament that they hosted. They beat Bolivia on the first match day in Dallas 2-0. They lost to Panama 2-1 in Atlanta. And in the third match, they failed to beat Uruguay 1-0 loss in Kansas City. I think it's fair to say the turning point of this tournament was the Tim Weah red card in the 18th minute of that match against Panama. That obviously affected not just the match against Panama, the duration of that match, but then also put the team, behind the 8 ball for the match against Uruguay on the final match day. Personally, I will say that, to your point about Uruguay, I actually thought that the game against Uruguay, despite losing, was a pretty good performance from the team. Had they beat Panama or even tied Panama and they put out that performance against Uruguay, I would have looked at them and said, you know what? Y'all gave it a great effort. Unfortunately, and we'll talk about this a little bit, unfortunately, refereeing did y'all in. And I mean that sincerely. There were some questionable decisions that somehow gave Uruguay insurmountable advantages. But I thought they were fine in that game. I thought they proved that they could scrap a little bit. I still think it's fair to say that if we were to just evaluate that game as a whole and what we learned from the game against Uruguay, it's that this team still struggles to build goal scoring opportunities for themselves. And they still lose the individual moments within a game. Now, is that any new information? No, but it's proven again and again. And that is just the identity this team has. So my question to start off is just, do you think that the Uruguay game was still an okay? Like, was that an acceptable performance? I know we lost, but do you look at that and go, you know what? I can live with that if everything else had gone well.
It was what I was expecting from the match, right? So and so what I mean by that is that, to your point, if they had tied and they played that match, I'm okay with it, right? Because Uruguay is I don't think
They're
they're.
good.
I mean, they're a good team. They're not a great team. So I think it's a winnable match. But to your point, they just offensively they just have not been able to figure out how to, in those matches, in those moments, be able to get the ball in, right? And so that's where
it doesn't help when you are down Tim Weah and then you lose Flo Balogun in the first half also.
Of course, yeah. I mean, all that comes into play, and part of it though is that it's kind of the same script here, right? Like, I say it for a long time to my daughter, to everyone else. Like, when you play different opponents and things aren't working, you have to change it up. Okay, I don't see Greg doing that.
No,
He did it more in the first cycle with the team. I don't see that as much. Like, I don't see that he had different game plans for any of these opponents, right? And maybe he didn't need to have different game plans in the first two, on paper, right? These like two very winnable matchups on home soil in favorable crowds. Why not? But the Uruguay match, they played hard. They had limited scoring opportunities in there. I think
they limited Uruguay's scoring opportunities as well. I think
they
to
did,
some extent,
right. I mean, the goal was in question, and so, but I think
what's geometry?
Yeah.
Good Lord, that was.
So, but yeah, and so I mean, again, I don't know. We'll get into that piece of it, I'm sure, but I think they did as well as they could with what they had, and they had chances, and they just need to finish them, right? This is where that is vital in a tournament, right? This is how you learn those things. The adversity of what that is, right? The urgency of what that is in that moment, right? Because the problem is this: you cannot continue needing the last match of a group tournament and having to win it. You can't put yourself in that position every time, because then when you get to the next knockout round, you got nothing left.
Yeah.
Right? You got nothing left, and that's how it happened. 2022 at the World Cup, and if they had
I mean,
advanced
to an extent that happened in qualifying for 2022. I mean,
exactly.
yes, we didn't necessarily need to win or draw in Costa Rica, but we definitely had to like not shit the bed, you know. Um i- and that I think is why I want to go then back to the Panama game, because I'm not trying to dismiss Panama as a bad team. I do not think they're a bad team. I think we would agree that they're the third best, or maybe they're the fourth best team in CONCACAF. They're a very competent team. They're playing well right now. They obviously made a Gold Cup final last year. They were part of the Nations League Final Four. Like, they're a very solid team here. But the reality is the U.S. men's national team is better. So the fact that the team, and specifically Tim Weah, lost themselves in a game that needed 100% focus to secure advancement to the next round, that is shameful, to be quite honest. And that's where I want to, that's the game we need to be talking about more than Uruguay, in my opinion.
Yeah, because there's a composure, there's a maturity that just doesn't lack. We saw it a little bit before Greg came on, when 2018 cycle, a couple players, Yedlin being one of them, that pulled that crap, right? You can't do that. Like that, you can't have those. You can't have those moments. And he was frustrated because of the play before where Turner got taken out. I get it, but you can't retaliate like that. You have to say, we've got to move on. And that's the thing. They're not able to, I think, transition from whatever is different into something from that. Is that a coaching thing? A little bit. Is it a player thing? Absolutely. And so that's the problem, right? They're still young, and so I don't want to use that as an excuse, because they're both all playing at pretty high levels. So that excuse can't really thrown out there over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, look, they are rapidly aging, which is sad to think of, because that means I'm rapidly aging. But they're young enough to, I feel like for me, they're young enough to have still that youthful energy and exuberance, but they should be experienced enough. I mean, Tim Weah has been playing on this national team since 2018. For him to lose his head like that in a match, to me, is an example of one of the cultural issues with this team, and that they do not respond well in match to adversity. And that has been a theme under Berhalter for forever. Um, they are a team that loves to have things in control, because Greg is a coach who looks at things through the lens of having control of a match. He game plans for everything to go right. He never games plans for anything to go wrong. And so the moment something doesn't go their way, they start getting a little out of control. The Panama match, to be fair, started off well. I mean, yes, the goal was called offside, but you created a goal off of a set piece. You were fairly in control of the match, despite Panama being, somewhat dangerous, which, again, they're a competent team. They're going to do that. And you even got a goal after going down a man, and you blew it. I'm sorry. I know you were down a man, but you blew it. You gave up a goal right before halftime, and then you gave a goal up right at the end of the game, basically. And some of that is down to, you had 10 men. But to me, both goals were a result of the players not fully committing to the job they needed to do on the field.
Yeah, getting up a goal in that situation, at that point, I don't say you're lucky, but at that point, okay, you got what you needed. So maybe you didn't see the adjustment. Again, it very much mirrors the Trinidad game, and the Nations
With
League.
Dust's red card, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors that. It had a lot of same feel, a lot of the same types of things. They were up in that match.
Yeah.
Again, a little bit different because they were up when it happened, and they let it go. But same kind of thing. It's just an epic collapse of it, and it was very similar in nature. So to me, to not be able to plan for that, to have an answer for that, was unfortunate, because it really seemed like they were on their heels. It seemed like they were playing with 9 players out there. Panama just turned it on, and they were just firing through them. Like, what is going on? I mean, they lost one player that was a forward, right? So, does Weah play that much defense? For them,
right. I mean,
I mean, he's there, yes,
exactly.
but he's not like all the way back, and so
You
I
didn't
was
lose
like,
your center back. You
right,
lost a forward. I agree with
right,
you.
and so it wasn't like the Dest one we had to sub out and do those things. You said,
Right.
okay, fine,
Totally.
we'll just we'll have one striker or whatever it is, drop Pulisic down, or Balogun up top, and adjust that way. And so, to me, like, they just weren't prepared. They weren't coached to be able to say, hey, if this happens, this is how we're going to quickly adjust to it. And then they're all discombobulated.
I'm going to be harsh on Greg. We'll both be harsh on Greg throughout the podcast, but I do want to be very critical of those halftime subs. And the reason I'm going to be critical is because they ultimately did not get you a chance to win the game. I didn't mind Johnny coming into the game. I don't think he helped that much. I don't think Johnny had bad appearances, but I think the problem is you took Tyler Adams off, right? In a game where I understand he's a little bit on minutes restriction. Maybe you should have handled that in the Bolivia game when you were up, I thought you limited his minutes there. And at some point, and this is where for Greg, the criticism is just that everything has to be by the book or scripted or data driven. In that match, you needed a solid 10 to 20 more minutes out of Tyler Adams, and that's hard to ask of a player who has been injured a lot. And I get it, but can you not say, hey man, halftime's here, rest up, get some recovery real quick, because we need you to go 15 more minutes in the second half. We need you to get us to 60 minutes. Because he is a legitimately impactful defensive midfielder, especially when you're going to have to be chasing. Now, he didn't have a great tournament. I don't think any of the midfielders outside of Gio Reyna had a good tournament. But that is the type of player you need against a team that you're going to be giving up possession to, which is just naturally when you have 10 players. So that one I think is fair to criticize. But the one that I think is the most fair to criticize, and I'm sorry, but Cameron Carter-Vickers was an absolute shambolic player this tournament. I mean, he was bad in the Colombia friendly, and Greg still trusted him enough to throw him onto the field. And this is another thing for Greg that we've always struggled with, is he has trust in players who haven't really earned that trust, but just by the fact that they've shown up, he trusts them. And CCV has earned that clout for some reason. And I really do think bringing on CCV instead of just going into like a more defensive 4-4-1 shape, really screwed up this team because he was just so bad. And yeah, that's on the player. You cannot let the players get away with bad performances, but the coach saw what he did against Colombia and said, yeah, this is the dude I'm going to bring on to help secure a lead.
Yeah, I didn't. I think that was an absolute. I mean, forget about how bad he was. Just the move in general didn't make, to your point, didn't make a lot of sense, right? Going, I guess, to a center back formation, which we rarely have seen under Greg. And so he was definitely kind of lost out there. And it was disgusting how bad he was. I mean, it was like, this guy.
He almost conceded a penalty kick, which
yeah, he had, and even before that, right before that, he had another foul that could have been called that wasn't, right. He just did not have any real, I don't know. He just was kind of running around out there, and I just And he
now, if you had brought him in, say you get to 80 minutes, right, and you've gone the time, and you bring him in as a third center back to kill the game off, that I do legitimately understand, right? Like, bring in the defenders and kill the game off, because I think the problem was with Panama is we let them have too much of the ball. And instead of trying to stay in control of the game, we concede. As soon as you bring on a fifth center back, you're admitting that you're giving control of the game up. And it wasn't that you played for a draw, because I think at some point you have to go, okay, we got to batten down the hatches and play for a draw. But at halftime, coming out at half, admitting you're okay with the draw, that's a poor decision from Greg.
Yeah, I think you can still find your moments. I mean, it's not uncommon to score goals with 10 players. It's not uncommon to win matches with 10 players,
Mm-mm.
right? Even at that point in the match. Like, so to me, I don't know. Again, this is where I think Greg just is out of his depth. Like, he didn't like he I don't know. Greg wanted to bunker down and just be done with it, and the team wasn't in the headspace to even do that.
No, and the thing is the players still failed to do the jobs they had to do, right? Even if Greg may have not deployed a great tactical game plan, I don't think it was a game plan that should have lost you the game because the players themselves also had bad games. We just talked about CCV having a bad game. Chris Richards was bad this entire tournament. McKinney struggled throughout this tournament. Musa wasn't great, although I think, again, not bringing Yunus Musa into this game against Panama was probably, for me, the bigger mistake. Like, I would have brought on Musa. Keeping Joe Scally in the match when you needed a goal, and not bringing on a Yunus Musa, to me, was a mistake. Nothing against Joe Scally. I thought he was actually pretty okay this tournament. Nothing more than a serviceable left back or a right back backup, but like still fine. But he's not an offensive threat, and so you go down a goal, and that's one of those things of when I get you had to make the sub for Turner at halftime, but when you make two others at the same time, you blow 3 bullets out of the gun, you only get 5. That leaves you with a lot of that leaves you without a lot of chances to change the game in the second half. And quite frankly, I don't think Greg is good at making adjustments or changing games from a coaching perspective once it started anyway. So maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But again, making 3 subs at halftime when you knew you already needed to make 1, to me, was a brain dead decision, because it also means you've forfeited, now you only have 2. You make 3 subs, right? But the halftime opportunity doesn't count as a substitution window. So why not, again, wait to try to get CCV onto the field or Tyler Adams off the field or whichever of those moves you wanted to make later in the half and kill some time with the substitution, right? Then you get another 2 windows still after that. You forfeited one of the substitution windows in the second half, as well as another opportunity to change the game in that second half. And that is just, again, where Greg is just not good at actually managing games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the Adams time, restriction was on that in general. Again, to your point, if you can keep him on there for another, 15 minutes, right? Like, I think it changes the dynamic of that. It's like, okay, now we've got 30 minutes left, like bear down. It says a whole half, right? It's a different mindset when you go into that, because then you can shift it, right? Hey, we're gonna give it, we're gonna give it 10 to 15 minutes to try to get a goal to take the lead, and then if we get that lead, then we're gonna bunker down. If we don't, we're still gonna bunker down, but we're gonna have that chance because you take off, you take off,
You also took off Reyna. Yeah.
right? You took off Reyna, right? So okay, where does that leave you? Like, and and Johnny and Adams is this 1-for-1 type of switch. So I don't think you're really gaining or losing there, in terms of that in that moment, because you kind of have to be able to play that. So you're right, to your point. We're taking out 3 bullets there, because you had to, Turner had to come out by the sounds of it. So of course, Horvath didn't really do us any favors either, but.
Yeah, that goal that we conceded, you can blame Horvath, but you can also need to blame 5 other defenders who.
You blame the defenders for sure. I mean, they let he get through there, but Jesus, I mean, he's got to get a hand on.
He's got to do better. I agree, he's got to do better, but
they
Jedi
didn't help him.
The ball into the stand, and this is where we're getting slightly into ranting, but like this is one of those things where Jedi, kick the damn ball into the stands, bud. Like, this is a thing that, like, we play in this CONCACAF region. Have you learned nothing from these guys? Where are the delay tactics? Where's the diving in to stop a shot? Where's the shithousery to try to get them to get a red card? Where are the dark arts that you could pick up from the CONCACAF teams because you've experienced it? You
That's
know,
Greg, but that's on Greg though. That's on Greg.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's not pretty. It's not possession. It's not control. It's not
right,
measured. It's not data driven.
right, and that's the problem, right? You can't have all these stupid metrics. Like, look, sometimes you got to kick the ball out. Sometimes, look, I don't like when keepers boot the ball field. It's a waste. It's a waste of possession. But guess what? Sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, and especially in this case, like, don't try to always look for that touch because Turner gets criticized, rightfully so, for his footwork. Right? It's not great, but you know what? Sometimes you put him in a position that's real, like trying to do something, but maybe it's okay for him to boot it up, right? It's okay for
Yep.
defenders to clear the ball sometimes, and so because they're always thinking that's the problem, right? It's Greg's in these players' heads. They cannot. To me, I do not see a lot of real flowing, creative continuity between the play. It's all very scripted in terms of what he's
Yes.
trying to put in play. It's very predictable. And so in that moment, Robinson's like, well, we've got to get the touch outside. I mean, and maintain possession. And then, you put, Horvath in a tough spot and he didn't make the save. And, now you're down one.
You need to hold the players accountable, right? And other than yelling at them on social media, we and the Federation have no real way to hold them accountable, correct? I mean, right? Someone has to, and that someone is the head coach.
Or themselves, too, right? I mean, these players, that's the thing. There's like this, again, it's this weird, like, comfort zone of players. And so I don't think they hold each other, it's like you got to be close. You got to, but you're there to do a job. You're there to be laser focused. I mean, honestly, like, I thought Pulisic was very good in a lot of areas. His maturity.
I thought he had a very good tournament, to be quite honest.
I really I was very impressed. Like, because it wasn't just his gameplay. It was his again, the rightfully so at the end of the Uruguay match with the referee. That's probably the exception to everything. But again, it's valid. So,
well, that referee was terrible and deserves all the criticism. So,
but
that referee was factually just a bad referee. I want to get this out of the way. Bad. Did things that referees are not supposed to do. Did not follow laws of the game. Made up things on the go. Missed calls, and I'm not talking fouls. I mean, he missed like several balls in and out of play. What direction it should be? Corner kicks, goal kicks, all these things. He was bad. He had a shambolic match.
I mean, I don't even know what how that gets evaluated. I mean, does someone evaluate?
Oh, I don't know how this man people are like, oh, he's inexperienced, and I'm like, the problem is when you're evaluating younger referees, because he's clearly an inexperienced in the sense of like this, but you have to qualify for this level of refereeing to begin with. The problem is you usually look for good referees who can handle these things and say, okay, well, here's your opportunity. Buddy looked like he had no idea how to referee a match out there. I mean, he was bad, quite honestly, very bad. And I don't mean there were one or two mistakes. I mean, there were mistakes all night. So right. I get Pulisic being mad. And as the captain, I don't mind him being vividly upset with the referees because that is his job.
Well, yeah, it is. And I don't think he was fully, I mean, again, it wasn't a terrible thing, but I think the play that I laugh about is he gives a yellow card and then I can't really see it. He gives an advantage sign right after issuing the yellow card. I don't know the laws of the game as well.
That's not permissible.
Right. It's just, the play stops. What I don't know is did they quickly start the play over, but typically you would blow the whistle.
Yes, so they did take a quick restart for sure. But in the laws of the game, that is not what we allow, because once that yellow card has been shown, you have a whole process. You've got to show the yellow card. You've got to write the name in the book, all these things. And you have to have what we call a ceremonial restart. That means that you build a wall or whatever, but you need to have people, okay, back away, get out of here, all that kind of stuff. Allowing them to take a quick restart when a yellow card is issued is a sheer lack of just referee professionalism, and goes against the laws of the game, to be quite honest. Yeah. But let's keep talking about the players, because those are the players, those guys we do need to talk about,
Right. And I it's funny because I look at this and this is what we hear this a lot. golden generation, which is crap to me. I'm calling fool's gold at this point. I really am on this because here's the thing, right? The players are better than what we've had in the past, right? But just like we talk about the women, maybe the players are better, but maybe everyone else has gotten better in that same time too, and we just still haven't caught up because we have not seen anything that we haven't seen before in terms of what the U.S. can do. And
Yeah, the
so,
only quantifiable thing we've done with this generation is beat Mexico on like every opportunity we've had. This group has lost to Mexico. This generation has lost to Mexico one time,
right, and again,
and that was in 2019.
right, and I'm not sure that's. I mean, is it because Mexico just isn't good anymore?
Sucks.
Right? I mean, I hate to say it, like, fine, we did those things, but like Mexico's a little bit overrated too when we talk about
Yeah.
these sorts of things in general. So I think that is something we need to consider a little bit again, and maybe it's in the framework of the national team, right? We see moments of it, but we don't see it consistently. We saw it in the they didn't show up for Colombia, they showed up for Brazil. Or did they show up for Brazil? Did Brazil just kind of hold back on that? I don't really know, but they definitely played with more intensity. Had more opportunities than they did
Sure.
before. But those things in general, you
And
cannot be.
there was intensity and there was fight against Uruguay and there was an
Oh
intense
yeah,
fight against Panama. I mean, it's not like it wasn't it's not like it was absent. The problem is just that eventually you have to look at it and say, are you matching that intensity? Because you could just visibly see Panama fighting more for the win. Don't
yeah.
tell me that you will run through a wall for your coach when you won't lay out to block a shot.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lazy or fear. I don't know what it is, but there's definitely a complacency that's happening at moments, and it's just not. Again, the full 90, right? I want to see a full 90 because this group, if they put a full 90 in, I mean, they're going to win a lot of games, and they're gonna fight hard. But and again, I think they put in a full 90 against Uruguay. I really, to your point, they really, had half the possession on that. They They had a few opportunities. I want to see more of those, and I think that's just where the tactics and formations just aren't
Yep.
built like with the way Greg runs his system against those top tier teams. Just your opportunities are limited, and you've got to make the most of every chance. You can't even slip through them. So
I do want to talk and try to highlight some positives throughout the tournament. We mentioned Christian Pulisic. Um, any other players you feel like actually looked like they wanted to be out there and win?
Anthony Robinson, he continues to impress me. Like he's always going. I mean, he's not perfect by any means, but he definitely. I thought he did well. He obviously, no one's perfect in there, and I think Balogun, got off, got off the little scoring Jordy had there, and he had some real nice chances. It was too bad to see him come out of the Panama match as soon as he did. I thought he maybe had another, 10 minutes in him to maybe get a goal because he right at the end there, he had a chance to tie it up with, on the wing there. He came through. So I thought those players played pretty well in the tournament. To your point, I think Reina did okay. I liked him better. What he did more against Uruguay because he was actually able to be more part of the attack than. But even when he was playing in the midfield, I thought he did all right as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair to point out that again in the Uruguay game, Flo Balogun goes down injured in the first half and has to come out. And no offense to Pepe, but Balogun was having a great tournament, all things considered. He had scored in the first two games. And I do have what could have happened if Flo is staying in the game against Uruguay. You just think that maybe he could have made something happen. Do I think that we necessarily win? No, absolutely not. But I do wonder. I think that's to your point about his play this tournament, the disappointing part of the Uruguay match, because that could have been something that could have really helped us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he definitely, came into his own, which was nice to see because we just haven't, we haven't had a huge run like that too with him, being part of the team. So that's a good thing. I mean, it was not as long as I wanted to, but this duration of this camp, I mean, it was what it came into camp. It's been about a month, so I mean, that's not as long as I would have liked to have been, but it's still
Maybe
that
was
is
the
still
problem. It was too long with Greg.
yeah, probably too many PowerPoints.
Yeah, too many PowerPoints. Good lord, man. Ugh. I want our next coach to not be a PowerPoint guru. Is that too much to ask?
I think the PowerPoint went out in like the early 2000s, but I guess
I
Greg
thought so
never.
too. But yeah,
But,
presentation. I'm sorry, we don't call them PowerPoints. We call them
oh,
slide decks.
it's like-
Slide decks. I do want to point out also, and I think this is something that we need to give some credit to Greg. Is the team came out and scored early in the first two games. Now, in the second game, obviously, that was taken away, but that's fine because you had the feeling that they could do it again in that game, and they did get a first half goal down a man. In Bolivia, they scored in the third minute. Um, it was a little weird in between the third and the 44th minute when Balogun scored, but you had two games in a row where you came out with good starts and tried to create goal scoring opportunities early. I think that is overall a positive. I do want to say that.
yeah, I was a little surprised by that, only because we just haven't seen that before, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it was a little bit of a different approach. I mean, and
maybe
frankly,
that was the lesson from the Brazil game because the Brazil game they came out really strong.
yeah, they came out
Created a
strong,
couple opportunities.
and that's the thing. I mean, we didn't see a lot of those shots from outside in those matches,
Yeah,
as much as I would have liked to have seen, but we definitely, to kind of set that tone, right? I mean, if that goal goes in, the game changes. I mean, that's
yep,
the thing. Like and that's the point, right? That's the point of it all. And against a team like Panama, who's going to be more physical on the ball, to that will change their game plan up, right? Because
yeah,
they're looking to tire you out and beat on you. I mean, they had 19 fouls to our 4, so and not a lot of yellow cards were given.
weird that the team playing down a men didn't foul the other team that much.
Yeah, well, surprisingly, I mean, but and with
You know,
the possession got crazy. I think it was like,
yeah, it did.
yeah,
That's what happens when you just throw on another center back and give them the ball.
all right.
Um, I don't think there's much else good to really talk about because any of it doesn't matter because you didn't advance, and that's the unfortunate reality. And I think it's fair to talk about the bad things that happened because they happened. I think overall, I'm just the thing that stuck out to me as being the most bad is just how this team continues to not play better than the sum of its parts. And then more importantly, continues to not understand that international soccer is about winning. It's not about, and this is one of the things that, yes, friendly results don't matter, friendly performances matter. And so many times in friendlies, how many times did we see the team come out and it was like they were like, wait a second, you're not supposed to touch me or take the ball from me. This team had a better intensity during the tournament, but too easily they got out. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Replacement, football movie where all the NFL goes on strike and they have to bring, yeah. And Coach Gene Hackman says, you got to have heart, miles and miles of heart. And I question the heart of this team.
Yeah.
And I really hate to say that because I don't know them, but it just doesn't feel like they're committed to winning games for the US.
Yeah, again, I go back to the word urgency on that. I just don't see, like, I don't want to see them be fearful, but I want to see them be, have a different, mentality out there a little bit. Like, it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, again, this is the first time. I mean, this is really the first time this group has had a long duration to work together, right? And so, in doing that, you have to make the most of it. And I just don't think. Again, I'm going to go back to Greg. I'm sorry. This goes to the leadership of this, right? This goes to that piece of it. I think they're a little too comfortable in that world. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have a little bit of a fear, like, in that. Like, coaches are all different. They sometimes they're better or worse with players, player coaches, all these sorts of things. Greg is kind of a player's coach, in my opinion. Like he's, he didn't really, oh, Tim Whale learned his lesson. Like, come on, man. That's it, man. Tim Wade, that doesn't happen. We're playing, on the 6th of July, right? Right, because you have this mentality out. Because you know what, you didn't set the standard with Dest, right?
Yeah.
Always coming in when you need him. Like, you know what I mean? It's okay, it'd been okay, like if he did that and they lost the Nations League, and then you set the tone on that. But you're letting these players kind of walk all over you in terms of those sorts of things a little bit. Like, there's little things here and there, but now it's all like buddy type of thing. And I really think that Greg doesn't set that tone a little bit, right? Or they don't like, because again, they all love Greg, and I don't expect the players to bash Greg. He's the manager.
I want them, and I want, like, despite what Carly Lloyd says, I want them to like and respect their coach.
Well, of course, but I don't expect these players to bash their coach. No one's going to do that. If you want to be playing on the national team, you got to kind of, you got to have the lip service that's needed to do
any team,
right? Because that's how life works. But to me, like, you can still say, you can still question things, right, in ways that are still respectful. But maybe because Greg is so vindictive in terms of some of his relationships that he's cut off with some of these players. Maybe they know that. Maybe it's like, hey, I can't even, look at Greg with cross eyes and know that if I do that, I could be done with the national team. Maybe there is that fear in terms of speaking up, but the leadership is there, but it's just not. There's no fearfulness behind, like, providing the results. Like, I don't care how they win. That could be as ugly as anything at this point, as long as they win, right? And so,
can I just say something that has been kind of on my mind for a while? And I'm sorry we're a little out of just order in general here, so thanks for keeping up with us, listeners. But do you remember in the narrative around the U.S. women's national team? Because I think there are some parallels between Vlatko and Berhalter. The narrative around the women's national team was kind of one of like, wait, why did we start trying to just possess the ball all the time? Why aren't we doing the things that made us successful, but learning how to, blend the skill and technique and tactical, framework with athleticism and fight and grit? There's a happy medium there. And, it kind of went from swinging from just be tough and physical to, well, we need to play pretty soccer and have possession and all this. Do you remember that kind of narrative around the Vlatko regime?
Yeah,
a little bit of an inferiority complex, because we saw, oh, well, in Europe they do that, and apparently if you're not European, you don't do soccer well, despite reigning men's World Cup champ being an Argentinian team. I feel like that started with hiring Greg. And it was a reaction to 2020 or the 2018 cycle being not great, because it wasn't. But like, Jurgen wasn't a possession-based coach. Bruce sure as hell is not a possession-based coach. I don't think he's a defensive coach, but he's not a guy who's like, we need to have 70% possession. And I think the problem was Ernie Stewart. And I'm not mad at him in total, because I think he did some good things, but I think he also could have done better. I think Ernie Stewart was enamored with the idea of the U.S. playing this positional soccer that doesn't suit who we are and what we have. And this inferiority complex of having to be this possession ball dominant team, which I'm, as a fan, I love. I'm an Arsenal supporter. That's the type of soccer I love to watch. But that's not what the U.S. produces. Now, that doesn't mean we go hire Jesse Marsh, and we can talk about that if we want. The guy who's gotten Canada to score one damn goal through 5 games, and half of those, it seems like, are against red carded teams. But to me, this comes back to this weird obsession with just having the ball. But Greg won't admit that, because Greg's never wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you equate it to this, and we've said this before. Like, you have the roster you have, right, and you have the players you have. So take the best of the players and position everyone to put in a position and a system that's simplistic enough to do that. So it's kind of like a high school team, right? Because you don't really have a choice about who's on your team. So those
It's
players
exactly like a high school team. You're
right.
right.
So you can pick and choose. Say, okay, well, this is where our strengths are. Let's work with our strengths and let's make it a simple system. And then we'll add different caveats to that based on the opponents that we have. Yeah, in the system here, maybe we look to work it in more or outside more, whatever it is. And so, but Greg is so locked in. We're not good enough to be controlling the system. We're just not. And I'm
No, and
tired of
there's a
saying,
difference between wanting to be a better possession-based team because we're going to have to against a lot of the CONCACAF teams we face, right? But we weren't struggling against that. We were struggling against Costa Rica, who at the time was a really good CONCACAF team. We were struggling against, to beat. No, I mean seriously, in 2018, that cycle, we lost to Costa Rica twice, and that's why we didn't make a World Cup, that time, and we lost to Mexico because Jurgen Klinsmann doesn't know what a formation is. But there's a difference. Again, there's a difference between knowing how to play with the ball and, as we're talking about here, being possession first. And I think that's the problem is Greg's tactical setup is about hitting these metrics that are possession or XG or passes like this or passes like that. And it manifested last night. And tell me if you saw this as well. In the final 5 minutes and stoppage time and even really, the final 10 minutes, when we're struggling, we're scrapping to find a goal. And the keeper comes out, completely misplays the ball. We've got a wide open goal. Every single player who touched that ball was thinking, who do I pass it to? Not, how am I scoring here? And that continued multiple times throughout. I mean, it was, I got to take a touch because that touch sets me up to pass it, as opposed to, how do I just take a rip from, I think Gio had one where he was inside the 18. I mean, he was at the top of it maybe, but like, he took a touch because I think they're drilled to pass the ball. Does that stand out to you?
It did because they're always looking. They've always looking to make that next touch. We'll make the next touch and then it's the open, but it doesn't work. It's too like. I would rather see players dribble more to attack the space than to pass it as
Yes.
much, right? Like I want dribble to be first. I still pass is important, but dribble, look for the opening, whatever that it is, cross, pass, shoot. But they're always, you can see them. Their heads aren't even up to goal, right? You're right. They're scanning to the left or right to see where someone else might be. It's like, take a shot. Like again, we don't see a lot of shots from outside. You know what I mean? I think that's where Greg's driven this system in their head,
Yeah.
and they just can't. They're at the fear. They're at the fear that they, aren't creative enough in his system that something's going to happen. But it's terrible because there's no creativity. There's no ability for these players to think for themselves, right? It's like he's inserted a joystick chip in these players' head to say, don't do this, don't do that, right? And they have no ability to be creative anymore at that level, right? And to me, I think that's concerning to me.
Well, let's fully get into our evaluation of Greg Berhalter. Now, it is 6:24 on the Tuesday after the game. So July 2nd, 6:24. Greg Berhalter, to my knowledge, is still employed by U.S. Soccer. We certainly haven't been told otherwise. We got a statement last night from U.S. Soccer that there is going to be a comprehensive evaluation of the tournament and how they can do better going forward and all those things. While, yes, the players need to share a lot of blame and there needs to be pressure on the players to deliver, this is clearly an issue because since Greg took over for the second time, this team has been disappointing in almost every match they've played. So I'll let you start. What are your issues with Greg to the point where this is why he should not continue to coach the U.S. men's national team?
Well, he hasn't changed anything. He was supposed to have a reflection period, which is why he didn't coach the Gold Cup when he returned. And so that reflection period was supposed to, allow him to evaluate himself, his coaching, and he was going to make all these changes to better the team. Well, we haven't seen that, right? Clearly, we haven't seen any of those sorts of things. He hasn't evolved. And again, I think Greg has just gotten this team as far as they can go. I don't think he doesn't have the the football mind to get them to that next level. And he's again, the second cycle, they're just the players are just comfortable enough where they're just not really doing that. I mean, we saw it in Bruce Arena. One is a great one. You had a great team that had a great piece of it, and as a combination, Bruce said he kind of lost them. The players just really didn't weren't listening to him. They really just were going to do their own thing, and they kind of stopped improving. And I kind of seen that with this group. They haven't really improved since the World Cup.
And I think that's right there at the start of the criticism of Greg is, for me, in 2018 when we hired him, I think we all knew he was going to get hired, but he wasn't a bad choice at that point in time. And I thought he did a good enough job in 2022, that cycle, and probably was a good guy to have on for that team in that circumstance, in those situations, right? If he truly is a guy that they really like and respect and seems to be a guy who cares about them as people and their development of their career, that's great for a bunch of 20-year-olds. Like, seriously, that's a great thing to have. But you then have to figure out, okay, glad we've earned that trust and respect. Now it's my turn to start pushing on you, pushing you to greater things here on this team. And that's going to be uncomfortable. That's going to mean me not being super nice all the time. That's going to mean me holding you accountable. But overall, like you said, it's going to mean that we're going to make some changes in how we play too, because we can't keep playing the same way. Not exactly. You got to make tweaks. You got to make adjustments. You've got to find other ways to win. We haven't seen any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw in the first cycle. I think all those things he actually did, right? He held them accountable, and they were growing and learning. And
Weston McKennie got kicked off the damn team for a period because he broke COVID rules,
Right, and I think we saw that. But now that he's come back, I don't know. I don't want to say he's, it's developing relationships, right? All these players have run a ton of stock with him, and it's just a big old, family reunion. It's supposed to hey, we're here to work, right? We're here to work. Let's push ourselves. Let's do these things and to improve, because that's what we're here for. This is not party time. We're here for business, right? And let's do that. And let's give our full effort every time we do this. And I just don't think we're seeing that. We're definitely not seeing that. We saw ups and downs in this window.
Well, and I think the thing that continues to stick out for me is, while we've had pretty much the same tactical setup for about 3 years now, we started doing it in 2021, truly committing to the way that we were playing toward after the tie against Canada. We go down and lose to El Salvador, we tie Canada. A lot of changes were made to get the win in Honduras, but then after that, he kind of retooled exactly how we're playing. And we did evolve through the 2021 or 2022 cycle, but we've been playing a similar setup for about 3 years now, maybe 4. Definitely 3 years. This team still does not operate smoothly or quickly within that framework. And to me, that's a coaching issue, because you're just letting them get away with that. You're not demanding a quicker tempo. You're not demanding better decision making. And again, that just goes back to, what are you actually doing as a coach? Because at some point at the international level, tactics are not the most important thing. And I know that sounds crazy, but Didier Deschamps is not a tactical mastermind. He's made 2 World Cup finals in a row, and the French, certainly with all the talent they have, are not committed to playing attractive soccer all the time. I mean, they for as much as the Dutch and the Spaniards love to play attacking soccer, they, outside of a run in the mid 80s and a run in the mid 2000s, it's not like that has produced great results at tournaments. So I don't know what he is demanding of this team. And I think the problem that I'm going to get into probably later is, it doesn't seem like he's being demanded of anything by the people above him.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a lot of U.S. soccer for a lot of time, a lot of years, and my criticism of them back a long time ago was their midfielders could not hold possession of the ball, right? They just didn't have the quality and skill. We see that with this group, right? They can hold possession, for enough periods of time that to help, you know, recover or whatever it is in those moments. And so, but Greg holds the possession and does this stupid horseshoe thing, right? And over and over and over again. And so, and again, but no one seems to care who's holding Greg accountable for these, right? Like,
Who is holding Greg accountable?
right? I mean,
Because it's not the mainstream media, which I hate to use that term, but I mean they have just started to turn on him, and Henry Bushnell from Yahoo is probably the first one to really start, criticizing him. They don't really hold his feet to the fire.
Well, U.S. soccer doesn't allow anyone to, I'm going to get
We
in trouble
saw
for this.
that Lawrence Dockery getting
Yeah.
to ask a question about, hey, like, man, is your job in jeopardy? And Greg's like, how dare you ask me that question? What are you talking about? My job is not ever in jeopardy. I'm the coolest person who's ever cooled because I have nice sneakers.
Right. And he's looking through the room because usually the press secretary or whatever he's called,
Yeah.
Allows those certain things to not be asked, right? He controls who asks the questions, and Greg gets a lot of softballs, but guess what? They were coming, and there was a couple of videos where he just did not look comfortable answering those questions, right? In those moments. And so,
And to be quite honest, those questions, as this is what I'm talking about, Greg, did you not expect that question? Like, hey, man, if you don't beat Uruguay and you get grouped, do you not consider that your job should be on the line? And there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but the answer of no is certainly not the way to answer it. You would absolutely want to. I just that was a moment that was truly just symbolic of one of two moments that was very symbolic of his tenure in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, his response to things. I mean, look, you can blame the refs. I don't like to blame refs for things, but
I think it is fair to blame the refs for the Uruguay match, us not getting a result. I truly do, because I think the offside thing is still, I'm not convinced that was offside. Who knows what those lines were? And the referee made some actual problems. Now, the problem with the Panama game is you can blame the ref all you want for being trash. Tim Weah's red card was justly deserved.
Right. But again, I wonder if Turner gets a yellow on that. Does it not happen, right?
It's a fair question, but you can't punch someone in the back of the head.
No. Weah was wrong. I just wonder, again, it escalates, right? They lose control of the matches, right? That's the point. Right? And I've always said this.
He did.
It's the protection of the players, right? That's my thing. The calls are gonna get missed. Stuff happens, but like when you see a team with 19 fouls, a team with 4 fouls, and the team with 4 fouls has more cards than the team with 19 fouls, you question, right? Because there was Balogun got pulled a couple times. There should have been cards.
No, the referee missed a lot of calls, a lot of cards that he should have absolutely given. That is 100% accurate. I mean, there 2 on Balogun specifically that were stopping promising attacks should have been automatic yellow cards for sure. But I'm just saying that, like, I will accept the referee was bad against Uruguay and impacted the result of the match. The referee was just bad in Panama, but you still got the red card, and it was
right.
deserved.
And they have to, and that's the thing. They have to figure out ways to work through that. It didn't go their way. It is what it is, right? It's not going to be your day with that. So figure that out quickly and learn to adjust to it. But Greg blaming the refs, Greg blaming his players in the matches, like, that's crap to me. Like, because that's not a leader. Just shut your mouth and be like, yeah, I didn't do my job, right? Okay, because if your job's not on the line, you can make those comments, right?
Yeah, and you can hold them accountable. Like, we got to finish our chances, but it's also on me to put ourselves in better scoring opportunities.
Right. They're canned answers. It's not like the first time these coaches have had to answer things. Like, again, personalities, egos, that's usually what comes into it. Like, you see all the time when that pressure's on. But like, for Greg to kind of throw his players into the bus a little bit, to me, like, coaches don't do that. Like, you can't. And I think that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The other thing that with Greg, that, I mean, everyone saw it, that, he was telling his players right before that goal was scored, 1-1 guys, 1-1 like Bolivia. Like,
And
come on,
he was relaying the score. There were some people under that like, oh, he was just giving tech. No, that he was saying the score was 1-1.
right? Like, to me, that's not focused on what the job at hand. Fine,
All
that
you had to do in that game was win.
right.
If you win and Panama win, if you beat Uruguay 1-0 or 2-1, but Panama beats Bolivia 5-1, then you go, good for Panama. Like, seriously, we would have been upset. Do not get me wrong. But, like, you did what you could control.
Right.
But
And that's
instead, you decided to focus on something that you have zero control over.
right. And I don't think that's helpful for the players. I mean, I've watched a lot of sporting events in my life, and like you've heard these coaches, the players don't want to know the score. They're not posting the score. And the fans may react, and you can't control that. But guess what? Like,
And he
is what it
lied
is.
to us. He tells us he didn't report the score to the team when we have a video clip of him doing it right before a defensive set piece. Right
and
before.
And right after they score, like, I mean,
yeah,
it's not a coincidence. And that stuff there, like, that's just, again, that's just the maturity or lack of from Greg. He just doesn't have it. He does not have that. And U.S. Soccer has to decide what they want to do, what their priorities are going to be. All right. And honestly, and I've been called on this, I want transparency. If U.S. Soccer just cares about money, then come out and say it. We don't care. We don't want the money. We're going to get it from that, and we don't care. Right? Greg's our coach. At least come out and say that and be candid about it. But don't pretend it's something that it's not, because Greg is not being held to any accountability. If this was Klinsmann got fired for, really kind of for less a little bit. Bradley got,
and the thing is, Klinsmann deserved to be fired.
He did, yes.
Bradley is the one who got. Bradley deserved to be fired to some extent. He never could beat Mexico outside of 2007. He never could figure out a way to truly beat Mexico in a Gold Cup.
Yeah,
we beat him at home in some World Cup qualifying, but Bradley deserved to be fired when he got fired, I think. But
they had plans. They had plans, right? Those two firing.
I do not think U.S. Soccer has a plan.
They talked to Klinsmann 6 months before he was hired. They were talking to Arena, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before, he failed against Costa Rica and Mexico. So that's the question, right? Have they been?
I do not have the confidence that Matt Crocker and his staff have a plan in place, because they never thought, what do you mean? Greg Berhalter is the greatest. We did a whole search process and, metrics and data and analytics and a Soccerology or whatever the damn company is called. They said he's good.
Yeah, and to me, that's where rubs fans the wrong way. Again, they put in metrics that he was going to be the candidate, right? English speaking, MLS, former US or whatever. Like, okay, Jesse Marsh comes up, Peter Vermees comes up, and Greg Berhalter comes up.
Yeah,
here are your candidates, guys.
And then he meets all the other on-field metrics that you want. Like, oh, well, he played a lot of young players. Of course he fucking did. We didn't have any old players.
Right.
What are these metrics?
Well, they don't mean anything, and that's where they miss it. I don't know. I think Matt Crocker's a puppet, because I don't think that would have been his hire.
I'm hopeful that he learned something, and that's why he hired Emma Hayes. Granted,
I hope so. Can she coach both teams? Seriously.
Pay her Greg's salary. But by the way, I just want to put this to bed, and I know that there's Casey Keller and has his opinions on these things, but there's no structural, legal, or binding agreement that says the men's and women's national team coaches need to be paid equitably. We had to pay Emma Hayes a lot of money to get her away from Chelsea, but we're still paying Greg more. And I'll tell you which one of those coaches deserves to actually be paid a lot of money, and it's not Greg.
Well, that's the thing. You pay for great coaches.
You paid for a great coach,
right? I'm okay paying a great coach $5 million, right? To come and coach this national team. I'm okay paying Emma Hayes that. I said that in the process. Pay him what you got to do to get the best candidates in, right? She was one of the top 2 candidates.
Yeah. We're talking. She was one of, outside of Serena Wiegmann, right, and maybe Bon Pastor, who just replaced her at Chelsea. Like, no one else is really at that level. And I do think it's fair, like, as we kind of transition into the after Greg, I think it's fair to acknowledge that the U.S. men's soccer team is not going to attract the best ever coaches. I think we have to understand that. Jurgen Klopp is unlikely to come here. Jose Mourinho, unlikely to come here. Zinedine Zidane, unlikely to come here. And it's just because those guys know they can get paid more and go to a better team. Like that's just the reality, right? And who knows if Klopp even wants to coach anymore. But there
And
are still guys who are in the mid-tier to that second rung of coaches who absolutely would take an opportunity to coach the host nation with guys like Pulisic and McKinney and even guys like Weah, guys like Gio, like they will take that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the that's the key, right? Like I think you could get an older, I don't think washed up, but you can get an older type of experienced coach to come
Sure.
in and do that. Again, I think it's an easier sell now, right? Hey, it's less than 2 years. This is your objective,
Yeah.
right? Bring in here's take an American assistant, bring in whoever you want to
Yeah, I
pull
mean,
in.
seriously, if it's hey, we need you to have a American or two on the staff. That's not. I mean, that's fine. Whatever. Like, figure it out.
Right, and
I do understand wanting a coach who can speak English. I don't think that should be the end all be all. If you could go find the best coach and he doesn't speak English, then go find the best coach. But I would argue that a lot of the good coaches that we could hire speak English. A lot of European coaches also speak English. You know what I'm saying?
Well, right, and I'd be curious to know with how many players play or have played for a coach that doesn't primarily speak English, right? I don't know what that
I don't know if the Italian coaches that these guys are playing for in Italy speak English.
right.
Certainly not. They've never had like they don't. They're most of them are speaking Italian in Italy. That's not a problem. Um, I don't. I mean, I understand the desire for that, but American born do not care. USMNT do not care. You know. Um, but the reality is, in my opinion, and it cannot be Greg. He has proven that he is not the guy for this time.
Yeah, yeah, and there's no question about that. And whether they have any fears at U.S. Soccer or any concerns, we'll see. Because I
We
think
want to win. We don't care who the damn coach is.
right,
Well, we do. We want to win. We don't care where the coach is from, what their first language is. We don't care. Win.
right, and we've got 60 some odd days before our September window.
Now is the perfect time. You say,
Right,
"Hey, Greg." Yeah, I mean, again, my timeline is if by Friday they haven't made a decision, then I think Greg is coming back, and that's going to concern me. But I need to know by Friday if he's coming back or not. Y'all need to have that conversation publicly with us.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah. To me, there's a whole evaluation of this stuff. Is like, are you not like you can evaluate all you want? You guys use metrics and all this stuff constantly. Like, it's an eyeball test. It's an eyeball test. You know what I mean? This is not what we want to see. It's not the results we want to see. It's not how we want to see these teams play.
This is
Eh,
sports. You're a results-based business. It's not about your XG. It's not about how much possession you have. It's not about your X back pass, behind the back pass or X shoe game.
Right. Because
Okay, go win.
this is the one thing that from a lifelong fan of the international team. What I don't understand that there's a bigger impacts, right? Like if U.S. is successful at the World Cup, which means, in my opinion, they have to go to the round, the quarterfinals.
You need to make a quarterfinal. I
Right.
don't. I do not. For the record, I don't think that is asking a whole lot in a 48-team tournament where you have a round of 32 and then a round of 16. I mean, you make it. You win your group, which is you should do that as a home team against like some crap teams you're going to get with the 48, and you win your round of 32 match. Then your round of 16 match at home, that shouldn't be hard. Make it to the quarterfinals. I do not think that is a high metric. Now, just find someone who can do that. It's not Greg. It's not. He has proven that.
Yeah, he can't do that. I don't think he has the stamina. I don't. But you have to do that because the outside of this, the implications of how it impacts the growth of soccer in America, I don't really fully grasp. I mean, it's an attention. It's I'm the kid in '94, and now I'm a parent of a child playing, right. 30 years later, saying, hey, I fell in love with a game 30 years ago because of the United States, like that interest. And so I don't know if the United States needs to be successful for that. I believe they do. To get that in front, to have that, because I see it in my daughter all the time. She is obsessed with the women's, and now, believe it or not, the men's team, and that's all she wants to watch, right? She wants to.
Yeah.
That's the only matches she wants to watch are the men and women, right? And I'm like, I love this. I'm just like, we watched the Brazil match this afternoon from the other day, right? Like,
Yeah.
she wants to watch that soccer. She wants to watch those teams, and so that is what we're, potentially that next generation of people are going to say, hey, you know what? In 30 years, I'm going to love the game, and my kids are going to love the game. We're going to have so many, because the U.S. has a lot of players playing soccer in the world, but they're just not
Yes.
playing at the highest levels, right? They're one of the top 5 in the world, I think, of players that are playing professional soccer. But we don't necessarily we've never had a world class talent, and I don't know if that will ever come or not. But you have to.
You have to put yourself in the best position to capitalize on the 2026 World Cup. And Greg has proven that he will not have the team play in a manner that will be able to capitalize on that. Because he blew it this time.
Right, and on a
You know?
smaller stage, on like in winnable matches, and that sort of thing. Like, because it's gonna. I hate to say it, 48 teams. It's gonna kind of probably be a little boring. It's gonna be a
Well,
little
you're
bit
going to
like
get teams like Bolivia in the World Cup.
exactly. You got to get. I mean, you're having a lot of teams in there that the quality is not going to be
Yeah.
great for for the knockout stage. You're going to have some high scoring
Yeah.
totals, and even in that round of 32, I think you're going to have that. Again, the draw is going to be interesting because you're talking about third place teams,
Yeah.
making the knockout stage, and that is what it is, and it's a money grab for them. But the quality of people have heard people complain about the quality of 24 teams in the Euros, right? Well, if you think that's bad, man, you buckle up because it's going to be even worse, I think, for the World Cup. There's more there, but I don't know if you have a group of death or not in those 12 groups.
All right. Well, we've been talking a lot. So let me just read a quick snippet from Meg Swanick's The Swan Dive newsletter from this morning. You can subscribe on Substack for free. She says, quote, "The very real opportunity to change soccer in America forever has never been more clear. We're co-hosting the 2026 World Cup in 2 years. The sport's popularity already traverses an organic ascent. The country's hearts are for the taking. But last night's failure, which makes the U.S. the first Copa America host to get grouped since this format launched in 1993, lands a staggering blow on this team's alleged pursuit of big things. It's time for a change." To that end, I think the question comes, and it's a two-part question. Does Greg need to be fired? And then what is a proper response from the fan base if he is not fired?
I would hope Greg would realize in reflection that he's just not the man for the job. I don't think he has ego. I would love to see him just step down and not have to go through the firing piece of it, because I don't think they will be firing him if he is no longer the coach. I mean, or is the coach. I think I don't know how the fans react. I mean, I think they go on deaf ears, honestly. I think they don't care about the fans. There was some email, I got it
I don't
late,
think they
that
do either. Yeah.
the US Soccer got they were looking for they did a survey to see if they could reach out and talk to fans. And I was like 3 or 4 days late responding to the email, and I still did the survey, and like, oh yeah, we'll be in contact. Of course, I think again I was outside the window of when they were looking to communicate with the fans. But um, I think seeing that, I think they do realize there's a little bit of you know, strife in the relationship, for a number of reasons: tickets availability, cost of different things. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of diehard fans that I don't know what they'll do. Right? Like I never want my team to lose. Right? I always root for them to win. But like I don't know how we move on if they keep him. Right? Like it's just you're just accepting the status quo essentially, and I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I have a couple of things. One, yes, he should be fired. I'm sorry. He cannot continue to be this coach. I think he has proven during him being rehired was a mistake. I also think that right now is the perfect opportunity to make a change and find yourself a coach that you feel to find a coach that can actually do it, but find a better coach, right? Take the opportunity to do that. You have, as you mentioned, 60 games before your next games. Your next games are in September, right? So you should be able to get a coach by then. It does not need to happen by the end of the month because maybe you need to talk to maybe a coach who gets knocked out late in the Euros, but you still like, hey man, he made a semifinal. That's pretty good, darn good compared to what we've been doing. Or, maybe there's a coach at the U23s at the Olympics that you go, hey, that's pretty awesome. Or there's a guy coaching the French women's national team who's waiting till after the Olympics to step down. But the reality is you need to move on from Greg Berhalter. You do not have to have a coach in place until, in my opinion, like September 1st. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care if he's announced the day before training camp starts. He needs to, he just needs to be in place by those matches. I guess he has to be there, 2 weeks before training camp just to make sure you get the player list correct, but whatever. But I do think there are some acceptable responses from fans, and it's something that U.S. Soccer cares about greatly, and that's monetarily. I would challenge you, if you're truly upset with this team, to do one of two things. And one of them, I think, is easy for people to do. Just don't attend games, right? And I mean that as someone who heads up watch parties and puts on events for games that happen. Do not attend them. If you want to go so far as not watching it, do that. But I would caution from not fully supporting sponsors of the program, because while that may in theory be something you feel good about, that's not going to that's going to negatively impact US soccer as a whole. Does that make sense? Like, stop eating at Chipotle is not going to somehow make US soccer fire Greg. You know what I'm saying? That's just going to possibly hurt, whatever activations they have with that. But I would say, if you're talking about like you want to boycott or whatever, stop buying US soccer stuff. That sounds really harsh, but stop buying their jerseys, stop buying their, whatever. And that's hard because I'm sure, like with you, your daughter's going to want a jersey. But, those are steps you can take. And then I would say that there are things that you can also then do. And it comes down to getting involved with soccer at the grassroots level. I think you and Caleb are great examples of dads who are trying to make the game better for their kids. You are not necessarily a certified coach or referee, but here you are out there trying to help kids get better at soccer and understand the game better. There are positions at every local club that can use volunteers, just the people who love soccer, to help out. Be it a field marshal, be it a concession stand attendant, those are ways that you can still help the sport grow in the way you want to see it grow, that are going to help in the long term. But I definitely think if you're mad about the team, don't show up to games. Don't spend money on US soccer. If it's even as like you unsubscribe from their emails. I know that's really weird. Don't be a soccer insider. Like all those things that you can withhold your attention and your money from US soccer. And if you are if that is what you want to do, and I would support people who do that, I mean, I don't necessarily think there's a letter writing campaign to go on necessarily, but there's ways to make your voice heard, and it's by the absence of your voice, literally in the stands, or the absence of your contact that they might have with you outside of that.
Yeah, one of the things too that I was kind of surprised to see was the American Outlaws main account and many of their branches that I follow and that follow me really providing their displeasure, to U.S. soccer.
And I do want to say, I do not think it's the place of the Outlaws to say coach in or out. I think that is a weird, like, I know people want that, but I don't think it's the place of fan groups, unless there's an actual, like, legal or moral issue with the coach. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just surprised. I was just surprised to see it, though. Right? Again,
Yeah.
I don't. Who knows who runs the accounts or and look, I'm sure there's more than one person that runs all these accounts, but the reality is that there was some of that outrage on that, and because we know they do, U.S. Soccer has, in times, reached out to the American outlaw,
Yeah.
community, and to try to help bridge things. Again, it wasn't that long ago that U.S. Soccer was reaching out to fans and doing surveys and doing these things, right? And I was one of them that they actually reached out
Yeah.
specifically to, right? And I don't know why. I'm not that big of a voice, but they reached out to me and gave me some time to talk to them about certain things. And right or wrong, they kind of you know pushed a certain narrative, but I appreciate that. It's a good experience, and I know other people that we see on our platform, uh, you know, that have also been reached out to, and some have chosen to call people out, and I don't think I'll be one of those, because I don't think that's right either, because I do like having a opportunity to get some information from time to time.
And that's the hard part, right? Like how often you and I want that information for like what we're doing here.
Right.
Some people don't care about that. Again,
Right.
there's a lot of ways to make your voice heard or unheard,
Oh, it's
whichever way you
true.
want to look at it.
Yeah, and I think I look. We have 60 days, but guess what? They've got 4 friendlies and it sounds like the Mexico one for October is becoming more and more reality, which isn't a real surprise. Um, you're right. Don't show up. Don't go to those events. Just don't go. Like and kind of see that, because it's not going to really impact them that much. They're not. Who knows who's even going to be in those camps? Like it's you know one's early in the club season, so it's in September, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
a lot of times you don't get some of the better players in there. But I think you really fans have to have that. I don't think I don't always want the fans thinking they know best, but like we've been through this. We've got some pretty intelligent fans in general. I don't hear a lot of Greg Berhalter supporters. Like Jurgen Klinsmann, it was kind of 50-50.
Yeah.
There was a time when I was supporting of him, and then there was a time that I stopped, right? And so I flipped the other side. So that's, I don't know if it was heard or not, but I think, you know, we have a voice. We want, hopefully what they want, but we don't know that. We want that World Cup. We want that success, and when it's not progressing in that way, I think it's a real it's a real kick in the gut,
Yeah.
because we expect more from this team. I mean, other teams that have had less quality have made it further in the Copa
Yeah.
America, right? And to a point I made earlier, to your point about a Copa America host never not getting out of the group. The U.S. has hosted 17 Gold Cups, 1 World Cup, and 2
Yes.
Copa
Yeah.
Americas, and they've made it out of the group every time but this one,
Yeah.
right?
And this is inarguably the most talented player pool we've ever had. I think that is a fair statement. That is a valid statement. That is a true statement.
Yep.
Top to bottom, player pool is stronger than ever. Now,
Yeah.
we can debate on if the top level players are better than the other top, but like,
oh, it's true.
even
And
1 through 26 on that roster are better
Right.
than anything we've had before.
I probably have 3 to 4 teams within my fan career that like have hit a high point, right? The 90 from 93 to 95, right?
Yeah.
That group there, right? They beat Colombia, they beat Argentina in the Copa America, and they they hit their apex there, right? You go back to 02 was great in general, but like 08 to 09 to 010 group.
I mean, weirdly enough, the 05 team was really good until they hit the World Cup.
Well, exactly. That group there, like that 02 to 05, they had some really good teams, and they beat some good teams right in there.
Yeah.
And so like, that's another piece of it. Bradley's team that went to the Confederations Cup, right?
Yeah.
Even Klinsman's teams, from kind of the 13 to World Cup there, 15 range, were pretty good too, right? I mean,
Yep.
and they all beat good teams, and they hit a level, but this group still hasn't hit.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to wrap this up with one more positive from the Copa America tournament. And I know attendance has been a hot topic of this, but I do just want to point out that in Atlanta, 59,000 fans and a very pro-U.S. crowd. I think the crowd was less pro-U.S. in Kansas City, but I think that's also just because Uruguay fans are like good travelers. But you still had 55,000 folks show up in Kansas City. Those are legitimately good crowds, including all of the shenanigans with ticketing and Soccer United marketing and Ticketmaster or StubHub or SeatGeek and Copa America and Comno all being greedy. I think, to me, this showed me that there are a lot of people who want to support the U.S. teams on the biggest stage. And again, sad that we missed that opportunity. But the fan base is getting better. The fan base is getting smarter. The fan base is getting more diverse. The fan base is getting more invested. And those are positives. U.S. Soccer now has a responsibility to give them a good return on that investment. And we'll see how they do that in the coming days. Thank you, Thomas, for joining me. Again, you can follow him on Twitter @USKeeper.
Thanks, Bart. Appreciate the time. And we'll see what happens in the coming days and coming months.
Don't forget, you can subscribe to the SCH Network on whatever your podcatcher is. Follow them on Twitter @SoccerDownHere. Follow the show on Twitter @SoccerForUsPod. Thanks for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.